unit of learning. You may be seated. And I'm breaking from Pirkei Avot, which we've been doing consistently. This is Shavuot, so I picked something appropriate for Shavuot. And so I'm going to actually give a little bit of a longer than usual talk about the nature of Shavuot and tie it in particular with the book of Ruth. We can find a summary. I'll tell you where if you want to look it up. Page 790. There's excerpts from the book. And it's a short book anyway. Actually, this may be the entire book in English here for us. What's it all about? Interesting story. It is Ruth who, at the end of the story, is going to be the ancestor of King David through Boaz. That's the whole point. So the question is, now, what is involved in this? It's a little bit scandalous. It's a little bit of a scandalous story. What do you mean a scandalous story? Who is Ruth descended from? Well, we'll start with that. Who's Ruth descended from? She is from what country? Moab. What's the name? Moab? From the father. What's the story behind that? Anybody remember the story of destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah? And what happens at the end of the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah? Lot escapes. Ooh, the two daughters make him, because it's the end of the earth, the world is coming to an end, and there's no man alive. We need to have children to make the father drunk. And so it is Ammon, my people, and Moab from daddy. So she's a descendant of sort of a scandalous background. Scandalous. Incestuous relationship. Okay. Who's she marrying at the end of the story? Boaz, who's descended from, and we're told explicitly, Judah. Right? Now, what's Judah's problem? Judah has two sons. Go back. He had two sons and three sons. He got a local woman for them. It seems like she was Canaanite from the description, not from back home. First son drops dead. Second son drops dead. What do you do? Also back in Jewish tradition throughout the generations, and probably among other peoples, if the first two husbands drop dead, you don't touch the woman. We don't know what she's doing, what she's putting in the food. There was something recently I saw a headline about a woman who was finally convicted of killing her husband slowly, but putting poison in slowly. Okay, so husbands do it to wives, wives do it to husbands. Okay, it happens. That's human beings. So what does he do? He's got a third son. What is the tradition? We know already before the Bible, what is the tradition? The name of the deceased must be continued through a child with the wife, through somebody in the family. And it would probably be the brother. That's what the formal halacha is later in the Torah. But this is before. That's family. And that would be the third son, but he's not going to risk his third son. Says, well, give him some time to grow up. She says that's nothing's happening of it. She disguises herself as a prostitute. His wife had passed away some time ago, so he was lonely. And they discovered then that his daughter-in-law is pregnant because of prostitution, and she pulls out proof. He gives her his credit card as a deposit, the equivalent, his staff and his cord, and his deposit, and he knows that, and he says, you are more righteous than I. So we have this ancestress of Ruth, ancestry of Boaz. It comes together again in this story, where now history repeats itself. The widow must be redeemed for the memory of the husband, and he is the close relative. And then it turns out there's a closer relative. The ceremony of taking off the shoe and so on. But it is this fulfilling of what was, sort of a turn of events. Right? So we see in this how things repeat themselves, how they come to resolution. What seems to be scandalous turns now into a basis out of which will come David, and then in Jewish tradition, out of which will come Messiah. So for Christians, also very important because they see Jesus as that outcome. Also, the same scandal, right? So that's one thing. There's a little bit of scandal hinted at also in the stories, because what did people do during the harvest festival before everybody became nice and middle class and bourgeois? As upstanding I mentioned, nice, decent people. No, people were farmers, and farmers have agricultural festivals, and when they have agricultural festivals, they have harvest time. And what goes on in harvest time? Everything goes on in harvest time. You're happy, you're celebrating. She goes into the fields for the harvest, and Boaz sees her, pretty girl, who is this? And she says, you tell the men, I tell the men, do not touch her. And he tells her, don't go anywhere else except me. What do we know happens? Men start up with the women. I'm going to protect you. Right? It's the reality. So now he comes in as the protector, right? Taking his responsibility. So those are some of the little interplays in this story. But now we come to some other interplays, the names. Ruth's name is a play on the word revaya, meaning abundance, fruitfulness. Kosi revaya, Psalm 23, my cup overflows, revaya, that's Ruth. Her sister is Orpah. Orif, what is Orif? The neck, the back of the neck, turning back. So she is going to be a source of fruitfulness and fruition. The sister is one who turns back. Then, who is the Orif? She goes back home, the sister, right? No, Ruth says, Orpah, a tradition has it that Orpah is the ancestress of Goliath, and Ruth is the ancestress of David. So we know what happens there. So what else? There is Naomi. What is Naomi? And she plays on the words. She talks about it herself, says, don't call me Naomi, which is pleasant, feeling good. Mara, bitter, I'm bitter, right? So that's the feelings that are in those names. See the names playing. Boaz, there's strength in him. What about the two husbands that die? You should be careful what names you give to kids. Because one is Machlon, the other one Kilion. Machlon, it carries in it the sense of the word Machala, illness. The other one Kilion, a destruction. Right? So there's a lot of play of names in here as well in this. So those are thoughts. But obviously the most important thing that we think of for Ruth is, well, why tie it in with Shavuot? Well, one, it's the harvest. Shavuot is the harvest, the end of the summer, the summer harvest is brought in. It is the wheat. Harvest is now collected. And here the harvest. They talk about the barley and the wheat. But there's another tie-in, right? We identify Shavuot with the Torah, with accepting the Torah. So how do we find, where is the connection here? Why does Ruth go along? What is it that happens? So we know this story. I'll go here. We read this, and pretty much we're familiar with it. Naomi tells the two daughters, go back. I don't have any more children for you. Yeah, they recognize this obligation. Right, the obligation. It is so contradictory to contemporary society. Contemporary society is built on the question of what is in it for me. Biblical society is built in it, what is my obligation? All traditions are built on the concept of what is my obligation, right? So in the United States, we have the assumption we all have rights, Bill of Rights, everybody's for rights. But the Bill of Rights only works insofar as we also recognize we have obligations. Now, there has to be a balance. So Torah is all about obligations. She has an obligation to carry on. The other one has an obligation to carry on, right? Obligations. This is Very important. This loyalty, the sense of loyalty. So therefore, Naomi tells him go back. Orpah kisses her and goes back, but Ruth says, and you go to page 791, she says, and these lines, very famous lines, entreat me not to leave you, to go back, not follow you. Wherever you go, will I go. Wherever you stay, will I stay. Your people shall be my people, your God, my God. Wherever you die, will I die, and besides you will I be buried, and vow only death will separate me from you. And only then, Naomi said, okay. She said nothing, and they walk on. So it is this acceptance. I am now loyal. I am part of you. And that becomes now the parallel to the children of Israel accepting the Torah at Sinai. And we identify Ruth and also with individuals who come to accept the Torah, even if they were not historically at Sinai, not part of the genetic Jewish people, but coming on from the outside. So that she becomes the emblem par excellence of the convert, the one who comes in from the outside, who decides to be fully part of the Jewish people. So I want to, yeah, go ahead. How often could they go back to the old town? It develops over time, obviously. Originally, it was the father. There's no question. Originally, it was the father in the lineage. And with time, by the time we come to the rabbinic period, it's very clear that it transfers to the mother. And there are questions about, well, why? What's the authority? I mean, for example, Cohen Levi is by the father, definitely, but Jewishness through the mother. And DNA has interesting things about mitochondrial DNA. You get into it, the Y chromosome DNA, and so certain things trace. So we know fathers, the Jewish father side stays Jewish. The mother side, there's a little bit of influx of outsiders. So you pick up a wife where you can. If there's no Jewish girl, you go to the next girl. That's what they did. Yeah. Exactly. So she becomes then the emblem. Right. So she becomes the emblem of conversion. So I'm going to just put up here for us, share screen, just show you this. Let me shrink this down. Right. Midrash Ruth Rabbah, which is the rabbinic commentaries on the book of Ruth, some of the stories, but how did it go? Sort of they expand on this discussion. He says, don't, do not beg me to leave you. And the word lifgoa is to beg, to request, but also to harm me, in a sense. If you make me leave, lifgoa, to go back from you. So do not sin to me. That's how the commentary says it. Do not create me. Don't let me sin. Do not impose your reservations on me. And right, do not try to stop me from following you. Anyway, I'm going to convert. The commentary goes on and says, anyway, I'm going to convert. I'd rather convert through you and not through another. So then it goes on. At that point, Naomi hears this, and she begins arranging the laws of converts for her. She said to her, my daughter, it is not the way of Israelite women to go to theaters and the circuses of the Gentiles. Don't hang around sleazy joints. Okay, you don't go to the bars and so on, the casinos, girl. That's number one. We're not like that. And where you go, will I go? Well, she says, okay, you don't go to the theaters and to the circus, the Roman circus, whatever it is, I won't go. Then she says, my daughter's not the way of Israel to reside in a house where there's no mezuzah. You have to put up a mezuzah in the house. It says, then where you lodge, will I lodge? And it says, your people are my people. Well, there are all sorts of punishments and prohibitions. And then she says, your God is my God. Those are the rest of the mitzvot that you have to accept. All right. And so, and the discussion goes on further. Your people, my people, to end idol worship. And your God is my God, to pay the reward for my actions. right? I take upon me the prohibitions. I also take upon me the reward for following the mitzvot. And where she says, where you die, I will die, there will I be buried. So the Lord do to me, as death will separate between you and me. So he tells her, well, where you die, I die. Listen, as a Jew, you're now liable for 4 different kinds of death penalties: stoning, burning, beheading, and strangling. If you're a pagan, nobody would touch you. You're now liable. There will I be buried. Well, there are cemeteries for those who are punished, and those who are punished like this. I accept it. I accept it. So may the Lord do to me. And then she blesses her. My daughter amasses many mitzvot and acts of righteousness as you can amass in this world, because obviously death will separate you between you and me. That's what she says, right? Build up your mitzvot, build up your merits in this world so that you will gain the world to come. That's what's implied. So there's some of the commentary, rabbinic commentary added onto it. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, this is written much later. Yeah. But it's reflecting, yeah. But you can see this reflecting, for example, it's reflecting the idea that anyone could have been the redeemer of the. It's not only her and the land also goes with it. So redemption of the land, going to it. That's biblical. That's in the Torah. But the idea that could be any relative is not in the Torah, not in the book of Dvarim where it's located. So this reflects something that was going on even before we actually had that. Right? So some things are very early. So the traditions described are very early. We can assume it's formulated, though, later. It's pulled together. Some people suggest that maybe the author had in mind a complaint later at the return from Babylonian captivity, a complaint against Ezra and Nehemiah, who were worried that the children of Israel who had come back to the land had married the remnants of the pagans, and they were losing their Jewish connection. They were no longer speaking the Hebrew, they were speaking the language of the people of the land, and they were afraid they would lose them. So they forbade them to have those wives. So this may have been a protest against it, possible. We know later, and this is very important, later on, Judaism accepted the idea of conversion. We're not sure at what point, at what time, and we see the idea of someone choosing to come in as reflected in the Bible by being circumcised and by participating in the Seder. 2 symbols, 2 symbolic acts of being part of the people. But for sure we know that by the time of the Maccabees and in the centuries that followed, many people converted to Judaism. Many. The Romans. Well, that's that was a setup. That doesn't count. That's a setup. That doesn't count. There was no intention of conversion to a religion. It was just we can't have uncircumcised. There's no conversion. It's just excuse. Unification of tribes. But the clear growth of conversion per se, some of it enforced under the Hasmoneans when they conquered the north of Galilee, when they conquered the south Edom. And so a large part of the Galileans are brought into Judaism by force. Right? But we also have, separate from that, actual conversion by identification. You have an entire country. It is part now. It's in Syria, between Syria and Iraq. Palmyra, and the archaeologists have the ruins where the royalty converted. We have people in the Roman court, we know, that are converts to Judaism. And so we have this period of extensive conversion. And so into the fold of the original Judean tribes, what's left of them, and now people who've come and chosen to go into Jews. We stopped conversion primarily with the wars against Rome, where some of the converts, for fear, turned against the Jewish people, sided with the Romans, and so you see a certain amount in some texts of enmity or anger against the converts, those that had turned coat. But in other parts of the Torah, other parts of rabbinic discourse, we have an emphasis that the enemies of the Jewish people, their children convert. Haman's children become rabbis. Nebuchadnezzar's descendants become rabbis. So they claim that. They claim Rabbi Akiva, the great Rabbi Akiva, descendant of converts. Right? So there's this debate going on. Later, we had no choice because when Rome adopted Christianity, conversion to Judaism became illegal upon pain of death. And the same thing happened with Islam. The conversion to Judaism became punishable by death. Punishable by death. It was carried out even into modern times. We know that the Inquisition in Mexico till 1800. We had a similar case when I was in Morocco. There's a tomb to a young Jewish woman who was beheaded. It was also in the 1800s. So this kept on into modern times. To the credit to the Christian world, the Christian world stopped beheading people for converting. They're already quite a few centuries out. They paid bloody wars and died by the millions to get to that point in the wars of the 15 and 1600s, but they learned it that way. Muslim states took longer, in some Muslim states till today. Conversion away from Islam is punishable by death. Pakistan, I believe, is still in effect. As a result, Jews were very, very careful. And where there were conversions, the convert had to escape. There's several cases where there was a Catholic priest that had to escape in order to survive. They went to Muslim territory. That was the only way he could save himself. In Russia, under the Tsars, there was a Russian nobleman who converted to Judaism. And as a result, that is when the Russians kicked out every last Jew in the Middle Ages, did not have a single Jew in Russian territory till they took over Poland and parts of Ukraine. It was only at that point that they had Jews in Russia. It was not by choice. The end of the 1700s. Yeah, the end of the 1700s. Yeah, the partition of Poland. They were stuck with a chunk of Jews they didn't want. The Austrians were also stuck with a chunk of Jews they didn't want. They had all of that part of Galicia. The Austrians took a different tack. Said, we'll hold our nose and we'll let them in. The Russians said, we're going to keep them down as much as we can because we can't let them pollute great Mother Russia. And so hence, as I say, concerns for someone to convert to Judaism was a danger to the community and to that person. Today, it's a different story. Thank God we're in a free country. People are free to choose to leave Judaism. People are free to enter Judaism. It's a whole different ballgame. Yeah. The theory, in theory, the process is the same. Yeah. Okay. So Marcella asked, within the Orthodox Jewish community. So I say, in theory, the process is similar. What does it mean? For the conservative, and even for the Reform now, they're closer to, been working closer with the conservative movement in trying to get a kind of standard procedure for conversion, especially in Los Angeles. An extended period of study, some proof of observing Jewish observances, involvement in the Jewish community during the process, and then going to a presence of a court, 3 rabbis, accepting Judaism, going to the mikveh, if it's a male, having circumcision, or if already circumcised, then a symbolic circumcision. The Orthodox, in theory, is the same procedure, except that they make it more difficult. Some make it impossible. But even within the Orthodox, again, depending on the rabbi, it might take a year, depends on the rabbi, it might take 2 years. But they want to see someone living with the community, observing.
It's subjective because essentially you have to prove that you study,
right,
that you are
and
in the community,
right,
and the rabbis are interpreting that.
Yeah. So I have a whole bunch of documents. I'm working on them now. I may have mentioned it before, from Germany, from my father's period as the chief rabbi there of the Western Zone. And Germans who want to convert. So in every case, most cases, they've met somebody Jewish, but that's not sufficient in and of itself. Why go through the hassle and so on? And the procedure is difficult. Yeah. And the procedure is difficult. They're not rushing. They're not in a rush. It takes also a year's time and so on. And this is with the liberal rabbinic court, because we want to make sure, are you just doing it to get benefits? Because after the war, there are benefits. Government's trying to make compensations. So all sorts. So we want to make sure. And we want to make sure this person had no Nazi background. It's one of the first things. They had the certification. And then they had a certification that they had abandoned their church, whether it was the Catholic or the Protestant. Right? But it is possible. In Israel, it's gotten very, very difficult because in Israel, it's become political. What I mean by that now, used to be the rabbinate was much more liberal, the Orthodox rabbinate. And they had special programs, special schools, and it was a doable process. In the last years, you have, because of the influx of Russian Jews, maybe 500,000 Jews who are not Jewish technically. The mother was not Jewish, the father was Jewish. We don't even know, maybe only the grandparent was Jewish. The rabbinic courts have been taken over and dominated now by the ultra-Orthodox, the more Orthodox. And they put up all sorts of obstacles. And very simply, I understand it. That's 500,000 votes against them. And that's why they're putting the obstacle. That's a political issue. Yeah. And they are putting obstacles, by the way, for rabbis here in the United States, in the Orthodox community, blocking them from carrying out conversions, also threatening them. It's a very nasty fight. So I know rabbis here, I've heard rabbis here talk about, very, very Orthodox rabbis, ultra-Orthodox rabbis, who are being blocked by performing conversions. The court's not accepting, the rabbinic court's not accepting their conversions. Also, a problem. So that becomes very, very political. Okay, so with that, let's go ahead now. The Torah service. Okay, we're going to wrap up. Yeah. You're talking about anti-Semitism? Yeah, not a new law. It's an official executive. I'm not. He can't pass a law. It's not Congress. It's an executive statement adopting the two basic resolutions, the two versions of resolution on anti-Semitism. What's called the IHRA, International Holocaust Restitution Association, and the other one's something called Nexus. They're similar. The Nexus is a little bit more allowing of criticism of Israel's formation, but it's very important. It's very important. Yeah. And I've seen it. There was a big ceremony at the White House and so on. I've seen it online. It should be getting around. It's going to be getting around because he made a big deal of it at the White House. Yeah. See, I haven't seen the document. I know he did he made a big ceremony in the White House with it. I know that. So, yeah. In the United States, for sure. Yeah. Because you have problems both left and right. Left and right. You get Lorraine Boebert saying stupid stuff about it, and you get all the woke people saying stupid stuff about it. It's being woke is everybody from. Woke is just a label. I know it's a label used for the far end of the political, towards the left of the political spectrum. That's the term that's being used. No, but that's the way it's labeled. That's the way it's labeled. Yeah, but that's not how people have referred to themselves. And that's a self-labeling by those very same people that you say the right way. It's because they use the labeling, but a lot of it is the red diapers. We used to make fun of, during the 60s and 70s about the hippies and yippies. They said they were the red diapers because they were the children of ex-communists to the most part. And so these are the continuation of the red diapers because all the professors are the leftovers from my generation. All the professors, all the academics, the leftovers from my generation, who never got out of their fascination with the New Left and SDS and all those things. So, and And that's a whole, that's a whole different issue. I know, but that's a word that's been used by people who identified themselves that way also. I know, because you want to say for social justice and progressiveness and so on, but it's used as a hammer to silence discussion really heavily in academia. I see what's happening in academia. People are being banned right and left. No. There are people who should not be. I'm watching. Major scientists are being banned because somebody once accused them of something and whatever it was. And they're being, no, that's the problem. The accusation goes. What's happening, and this is affecting Jewish students. By the way, City University of New York, commencement speaker, her whole commencement address was an attack against Israel and against Zionists, out and out front, right? Straight, complete, the whole discussion. This is the atmosphere. We also have Lorraine Bobbert on the other side with her stupidity, also saying, "Wow, this is an attack on conservatives by having this also." Right? It's both hands. So it's going to be very significant. Okay, Deborah Lipset has a big job ahead of her. Yeah. To the angels. The angels didn't want to give it away. No, to who? Yeah. There's all sorts of versions that the angels don't want to give the Bible, the Ten Commandments, to the human beings, and Moses is arguing with the angels. That's one version. Another version is that the children, God offers it to the whole world, and nobody wants it. Nobody wants it. And then he goes to the children of Israel, and guess what? They don't want it either. They don't want it either. So it says they were at the bottom of the mountain. The rabbis at the bottom of the mountain means he took the mountain of Sinai, held it over them. It says, "You accept this willingly, or if not, I'm destroying the entire world. If not, that's it." And so the first 10 commandments was not happily accepted. I mean, not happily accepted. As soon as that passes, they dance with the cow, right? Dance with the calf, right? Well, they'd rather go back to the old days. So when do we know that the Jews really accepted the Torah? When do we know? Because at Purim in the Megillah, it says, then the Jews accepted on themselves. Not until they saw all that had happened to them in history, the exile, the destruction, the exile, the return, the threats to the children of Israel, and then being saved in the last minute. Only then did they actually decide to accept the Torah, right? So why would anybody want to accept something that says, don't steal, don't rob, don't have sex with your neighbor's wife? Why would anybody want to accept it? You tell me, right?
Why?
That's, human nature is the opposite. So why would anybody want to take it?
Well, there's a joke. There's a joke when Moses come back with the second proof. And the Jews asking, how much is it? He said, it's free. So we'll take
two. We'll take two. That's it. Yeah. That's it. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sure. What do you, right. The guarantee, yeah. Who are your guarantees? There's another version. So they say, well, it says it's not free. You got to pay something. It says, right? It's not free. So he says, okay, we give you our answers. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, listen, they're dead already. They're with me. And so on down the line, and till they get to, so long. There are many discussions like the Talmud, Midrash. There are many such discussions, and they finally come in and say, "Yeah, we'll guarantee our children." All right, how do we know we guarantee our children? The Midrash goes on and says, "All the souls of all the future generations were there." That's how they could guarantee it. All right, all right. No. This straight rabbinic traditions. Because what we're doing, that's a whole different story. What do we mean by midrash? What's its function? What's its purpose? How did it grow? How did it develop? That's a whole different story. That's a different story. By saying, okay, well, we better go ahead because we still have Torah reading.